Remember this little thing? No, it is not a remote. This is the iPod Shuffle, the iPod that refused to have a screen. And technically, this is Apple's first ever wearable bit of tech. It went through 4 generations, some were brilliant, others were absolute crimes against usability, but together they created the purest form of iPod that Apple ever made. These were all about one thing only, your music. No distractions, no scrolling, and no social media. And here's the thing, the Shuffle might not look like much today, but one tiny design choice quietly changed the future of Apple hardware forever. So let's take a look back at the full history of the iPod Shuffle, all 4 generations, all the odd decisions, and all the nostalgia. I've even given my intro logo a retro Apple inspired look for the video series going forward. What's up guys, welcome back to the channel and to another episode of Retrospective Tech. We've already revisited some of the classics like the iPhone 4 and the 5S. Those are 2 of my favourite iPhone designs ever. And you might have seen my shorts covering some of the iPod family, including the Shuffle. Those kind of blew up. It turns out that a lot of you didn't even know that this little thing existed, especially the 3rd gen, and this was the most controversial one. But I haven't covered them all, so today we're going all in with a full history of the iPod Shuffle. 4 generations across 12 years, from a chewing gum sized stick to a tiny little wearable square with buttons, proper time capsule stuff. So let's dive in. Now just to set the scene for the younger viewers watching, back in 2001, the iPod revolutionised how we listen to music. It wasn't the first portable music player, but it ditched the cassettes and CDs and let you buy songs directly from iTunes or import them from a CD and then sync them to a tiny device in your pocket. Suddenly, instead of carrying a stack of scratch discs, you had 1,000 songs in your pocket. And for most of us, that was your entire music library. And scrolling through using that click wheel was so cool, it made you feel like the absolute king of tech. The iPod made music personal again. White earbuds became a status symbol, and the iPod laid the foundation for the Apple that we know today. Across the years, the iPod lineup came in all shapes and sizes. And in January of 2005, Steve Jobs walks on stage and basically says, there are a load of bad MP3 players out there with tiny screens that feel awful to use, so Apple is going to solve that by removing the screen entirely. It came in only white polycarbonate plastic, the iconic Apple look of the era. It was about the size of a pack of gum. It had these simple playback controls on the front, a headphone jack up top, and a slider on the back for play, order, or shuffle. Back then, people used the shuffle mode a lot, so this iPod was literally built for that. The tagline they used was "Life is random." It weighed only 22 grams and it included a lanyard in the box, so you could wear it and listen to music all day with the 12-hour battery life. Popping off the end cap reveals a USB connector, so you could charge it, sync it, or even use it as a thumb drive. Yes kids, this was before the days of Dropbox and AirDrop. Moving files around required actual objects, and you were the coolest kid in school if you brought in your homework assignment on an iPod. The base model was $99 for 512 megabytes. That is only around 120 songs, so, real favourites only. Or you could double it with the 1 gig version. It also introduced autofill in iTunes, which would pick a load of random songs for you, or it would prefer the ones you had given star ratings to, which, looking back, always felt kind of weird, like, why did I buy the song if it's only 2 stars? In fact, it still exists today in Apple Music, it's just turned off by default. This was a gateway product into the Apple ecosystem. You bought a Shuffle, built up your iTunes library, and then suddenly you owned a Nano and maybe an iPhone a few years later. Apple knew exactly what they were doing. Let me know if this was your very first iPod. 1 year later, the Shuffle had sold 10 million units. It was a huge success. And the number one thing that people loved about it was its wearability. But that lanyard often got in the way, especially for running. So for the 2nd gen, Apple shrunk it down massively and they built in a clip on the back. Suddenly, this became the perfect gym and running companion right out the box. You could clip it anywhere, so much so that Apple gave it the tagline, the most wearable iPod ever. It was now built from aluminium, even lighter than before at 15 grams, and still screen-free. Just a toggle switch underneath for shuffle, and the familiar playback circle on the front. Battery life was still around 12 hours, despite it being so much smaller, But the USB connector was gone. Instead, you now charged and synced it via the headphone jack using this little dock that came in the box. Look how cute it is. Storage doubled to 1GB with a new lower starting price of $79, and it would later come in a bunch of different colours so you could match it to your trainers or your style. Honestly, this feels like the purest version of the Shuffle, as you'll see, we're going to come back to this one. It was simple, wearable, affordable, it just did the job. Were you team silver or did you pick a bolder colour? Let me know in the comments. Now, a quick pause before we get to the most controversial Shuffle of the lot. I've had a couple of questions lately about the t-shirts that I've been wearing. I originally designed these just for something that I can wear in my videos that has got my logo on. But now you can actually grab these too on my website. They come in black or white with a couple of different logo styles. The retro one that I'm wearing now is, oh, it's so good, I love it. And because it's getting colder out there, I've also designed some hoodies, plus mugs and coasters for your desk if you fancy a nice cuppa while you're watching your favourite tech vids. Just being here and being subscribed means so much already, so thank you for watching my videos. But if you want to support the channel a little bit more and get something cool to wear in return, then go check them out at jackington.com. And you can get 20% off with code JACK20 for a limited time. If you grab one, post a pic and tag me, I'd love to see. And yes, my free wallpapers are still on my website as well, so at least go and check those out and grab those if you haven't already. Back to the Shuffle, and this is the weird one. Apple looked at the second gen and they looked at the buttons and they said, no, too many controls, let's delete them, all of them. This is the third generation released in 2009. It was tiny, sleek, it still had the clip on the back, and honestly it looks like something that Johnny Ive would design in his sleep. This was about as minimal as you can really get. It almost looks like a tiny AI pin device that could exist today. It came in a bunch of different colours, including a super fancy polished stainless steel version, a special edition sold exclusively in Apple stores, and that one's scratched if you so much as looked at it. Now, to control playback, you were forced to use the included headphones with the inline controls. If you lost those, then you were basically stuck with whatever random playlist chaos that the Shuffle had last decided on. Credit where it's due though, this was the first music player that could talk to you. The new voiceover feature would announce songs and playlists in a wonderfully robotic tone, very budget Jarvis.
All you need is love, the Beatles.
And this allowed, for the first time, having multiple playlists on the Shuffle, so you could have your workout mix and something more chill to relax to. Bear in mind though, this launched about a year after the first Iron Man film, so a talking gadget that was this small felt kind of cool and futuristic. But even back then, it felt more complicated than it needed to be, especially for a product that was built on simplicity. Now, when I showed this in a short, most people couldn't even remember that this one existed, which tells you everything about how popular it was. But everyone wanted to know, how did it charge and sync? Well, like the second gen, it used the headphone jack. It came with this 3.5mm to USB adapter in the box. Yes, this was our first ominous sign of Apple's dongle future to come. Being so tiny, it now had up to 10 hours of playback, but storage doubled again to 2 gigs, and it had an even lower starting price at $59. And sure, it may be the weirdest iPod that Apple made, but I do really appreciate the simplicity of the design. It's such a fun artifact of the era, with Apple and Johnny Ive going full minimalism mode. I can imagine that he was the one behind wanting to get rid of all the buttons. Then a year later in 2010, and even Steve Jobs admitted that people really missed having the buttons from the second gen, but they loved having VoiceOver for managing multiple playlists. So Apple combined the best of both worlds, and the fourth and final version of the iPod Shuffle was born. Yep, that's right, Apple invented bringing the buttons back just as fast as they got rid of them. The Shuffle now came in a tiny square design, very reminiscent of the Gen 2. Look at this little thing, it's actually kind of hard to hold it on camera. And this was before the days of Find My, so you didn't want to lose this under the sofa cushions. With the buttons returned, the fans rejoiced and balance was restored. It had 2 gigs of storage, 15 hours of battery life, and it was the most affordable iPod ever at $49. It came in loads of colours across its life: silver, blue, gold, space grey, and product red, a full rainbow of nostalgia. And the clip remained, making it the go-to gym buddy for so many people. This model stuck around the longest, for 7 years, from 2010 until 2017, That's a pretty decent run in tech terms. This was the shuffle that you probably remember clipped onto backpacks and hoodies. On the 9th of September 2014, the iPod Classic was discontinued. Then on the 27th of July 2017, the iPod Shuffle and Nano followed suit, and the iPod Touch was the final survivor. And with that, the true era of the iPod finally ended. Pour one out for our tiny king. Now yeah, the Shuffle might not look like much today, but I seriously think that one design choice changed everything. That simple clip pushed Apple into what would later become the wearable tech that we know today. It later found its way onto the 6th gen iPod Nano, the one with the touchscreen, which some people took even further, attaching it to a wristband to wear it as an iPod watch, years before the first real Apple Watch was ever even announced. But tracing it back, and the Shuffle was Apple's first piece of tech that was designed to be worn from day one. So let me know in the comments, should the Shuffle come back? Which generation was your favourite? And fess up, did you ever accidentally wash one with your clothes? And would you buy a Shuffle in 2025 if Apple dropped a new one in a surprise event? There is something quite freeing about a music device with no screen, no notifications, no doom scrolling, or temptation to check your DMs. Just clip it on, go for a run, or just chill out with some music. I would honestly love to see Apple give us something like a modern Shuffle. The idea of like something that could talk to you, that you can now talk back to, doesn't seem so crazy anymore. Especially now with this sort of growing trend with people wanting to disconnect. But maybe music stored directly in the AirPods case seems like a more natural evolution of the product, especially now that the latest Pros have heart rate tracking built in, so you can leave your watch and phone behind for a run. If you enjoyed this episode, hit like so more people can find it, subscribe and hit the bell to see more retrospective tech, and let me know what we should look back at next. If you want to see more in the series, check out the playlist linked below. There's more nostalgia where that came from. Head to my website to pick up a cool shirt. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.